This rare Soviet train, still dressed in its original paintwork, had just returned from another time travel journey through a forgotten utopia. In the previous 20 minutes, it went from the post-war rationalist dream of a shining modern age to the decadent late capitalism present we ended up 80 years later. It passed through a metro station famed for its beauty, followed by one notorious for its dread. Crossing the Danube River, the train will roll into the countryside, where mysterious alien-shaped slabs of concrete loom over the skyline. This is the former Yugoslavia, a land of the cold, unwelcoming, and at the same time irresistibly enchanting aesthetics. Join me for a ride, and you'll discover how the only politician Stalin ever feared created the most Instagrammable architectural style in the world. How monuments meant to unite nations became the backdrop for pop stars and paramilitaries. And how war criminals financed public transport construction while governments failed. Along the way, we'll listen to some 90s Balkan turbo folk music, another very important artifact of the era. Are you ready? Let's go! World War II was brutal in the Balkans. Partisan fighting swept through nearly every village and cost the region about 1 million lives. When the bloodshed ended, thousands of battlefield monuments were commissioned to permanently honor the courage of the soldiers. But how is this different from any other European country? World War II was brutal everywhere, and everywhere people honor their heroes. So why is Yugoslavia especially known for its post-war memorials? A few things set it apart. When the war ended, Yugoslavia was a still very young federation of 6 republics and 20 ethnic minorities. Orthodox Serbia, Catholic Croatia, Muslim Bosnia. Some of them had centuries-old conflicts, which made the union quite fragile. For example, take this Serbian hit from the 1990s. They cursed my priest, and I cursed their monks, the singer recalls, referring to his Croatian neighbors. The Croats, of course, did not stay silent. These nations have a truly complicated relationship. So after World War II, the liberating war that united the new Yugoslavia in their fight against the Nazis, the central government generously financed memorials in every republic, so each region could see its own sacrifice honored and remember they were all on the same team. The new country's leader, Josip Broz Tito, a communist revolutionary and head of that glorious partisan movement, was initially closely aligned with the USSR. The first wave of monuments went up in the socialist realist style, common across the Eastern Bloc. They were perfectly boring bronze sculptures of workers and soldiers, surrounded by marble and granite. However, the Soviet leader, Joseph Stalin, did not view Tito as an equal. He saw him merely as a junior partner. He sought to impose his own economic model on Yugoslavia and aimed to prevent Tito from asserting control in neighboring Bulgaria and Albania. Tito, however, refused to accept this, and with good reason. Unlike other Soviet bloc countries, Yugoslavia had liberated itself from the Nazis without the assistance of the Red Army, so Tito felt like he owed nothing to Stalin. Tensions mounted, and in 1948, just 3 years after the end of the World War II, the two seemingly allied socialist regimes broke apart for good. Yugoslavia started searching for a new visual language to distance itself from the Soviets. Brutalist abstraction was the perfect fit. Raw, board-marked concrete, also called béton brut, hence the name brutalism, was cutting-edge technology at the time and signaled an openness to Western avant-gardes. Brutalism wasn't invented by Yugoslavian architects. It originated in post-war England, and it was inspired by the works of French architect Le Corbusier. However, while English brutalism was primarily used for utilitarian buildings, many of which are now being demolished due to age, it was the Yugoslavs who turned ordinary rough concrete into a true art. And yes, this is still a channel about railways. Stick with me, it will all make sense soon. Abstract forms were universal. They replaced ethnic symbols and gave each group equal ownership as a memorial, preventing anyone's folklore from overshadowing the others. A starburst or stylized petal could belong to everyone. Steel-reinforced concrete was perfect for these shapes. Sculpting them in stone or bronze would have been nearly impossible. Concrete was also locally made and very cheap. Daring young sculptors called their memorials machines for remembering the future. Their sci-fi shapes encouraged visitors to look ahead, not back. This Kozara mountain monument in Bosnia and Herzegovina was opened in 1972. It honors the resistance to the brutal Nazi forces' offensive of summer of 1942, in which about 2,500 partisans and some 68,000 civilians were either killed or deported to concentration camps. 2 decades later, when the war again swept the Balkans, the monument inspired a new generation of volunteers from the town of Kozarac and the surrounding villages to fight for what they believed was right. Meanwhile, Belgrade, the capital city of the leading republic of Serbia and the whole of Yugoslavia, was busy overhauling its railway junction. Plans included a new railway bridge, a semi-underground central station, and a 4-kilometer tunnel, replacements for the 19th century network that could no longer handle modern traffic. The work on the tunnel and on the passenger stations began in 1989, and it was the worst possible moment to launch such an ambitious project. Just 2 years later, Yugoslavia collapsed into several fragmented republics, setting off a series of brutal wars. International sanctions following the Bosnian War, for which Serbia was held responsible, heavily affected the economy. They shut off foreign trade, finance, and outside technical help. Fortunately, the project could still lean on local labor and construction materials. In order to fund it, the government used hyperinflationary money printing. Wages lost value within weeks, so the real cost of labor crumbled, yet crews kept reporting for duty, because state-owned companies were the only ones still paying. Working on strategic infrastructure also granted exemption from combat service, giving many workers a powerful incentive to stay on the job. For President Slobodan Milosevic, the project became a badge of prestige, a proof that Serbia can build even under isolation. The 43-meter-deep Vukov Spomenik station, opening on July 7, 1995, was broadcast live on state TV. Milosevic boasted that the country has delivered the most modern underground station in Europe despite a total international blockade. He did not explain how he bankrolled such a luxurious station in a war-torn country, virtually cut off from the global economy. We'll have to dig into that ourselves. The station looks genuinely impressive, with a tastefully decorated vestibule and escalator hall that feels straight out of a Soviet-era metro. But instead of the usual Soviet subway trains, you'll find export-grade Soviet suburban trains, narrow-profile units built to the standard 1,435mm gauge, specially for Yugoslavia. They are tweaked for city service, note the 3 doors per car, yet spotting these trains running underground is still a pretty unusual sight. Every so often, freight trains and regional diesel rail buses rumble through the station as well. At the far end of the hall, a relief depicts Belgrade in the 15th century. The station quickly became one of Belgrade's most beloved landmarks. Ceca, Serbia's superstar singer, affectionately known as the Serbian Mother, even featured it in a music video. And that was no coincidence. At the time, she was married to Željko Ražnatović, better known as Arkan, another iconic figure of the era. He had robbed several banks in Western Europe in the 70s, escaped prison, returned to Yugoslavia, and when the war broke out, founded the Serb Volunteer Guard, one of the most feared and effective paramilitary groups. Arkan even launched his own political party and ran in parliamentary elections. Rumor has it that his influence played a big role in Ceca's commercial success. The Vukov Spomenik station was co-financed by another of Arkan's protégés, Dafina Milanović, a businesswoman who, in return for her investment, was promised a generous share of the station complex retail and office spaces. The money came from the infamous Dafina bank she was running. In the early 90s, the bank offered everyone 150% interest a month.
I to jeste Dafina banka.
Ordinary Serbs, desperate to outpace state-driven hyperinflation, entrusted their savings to Dafina. The bank turned out to be Serbia's biggest pyramid scheme, protected by Arkan, who was an early investor and, unsurprisingly, was given the privilege of knowing exactly when to cash out. The pyramid scheme collapsed in 1993. Arkan was shot in 2000, and Dafina was put behind bars in 2002. Yet Vukov Spomenik still carries passengers every day, giving people hope that Belgrade can one day move beyond a single underground railway line to a full-blown metro network. The other stations, however, untainted by war criminals' money, aren't nearly as fancy. Karađorđev Park station is easily the eeriest metro station the world has ever seen. Bare concrete walls, dim lighting, rust streaks and graffiti give it a catacomb-like feel. Amid these tunnels rumble old workhorse trains, purely utilitarian and also covered in graffiti. Inside, darkness dominates. Half the light fixtures are dead. When the train finally bursts back into daylight, you breathe a little easier. Yes, you made it. Then you can lean out of an open window and enjoy the breeze and the view. And so the Belgrade Underground Railway unintentionally continues the proud tradition of Yugoslav brutalism. The stations are at the bare minimum. Their structure is visible. Each component is doing its one and only one honest job. The train all but says, "Look, I'm not some glassy, over-engineered Western European unit that feeds braking energy back into the grid. I'm proudly an Eastern European machine. I burn that energy through the huge brake resistor bank on my roof." You can't be indifferent to Yugoslav brutalism. You either love it or hate it. Most people see it as nothing more than a rundown pile of concrete covered in graffiti. Others find it fascinating and embark on 2-week bus tours of war memorials. Why is that? I can't speak for everyone, but for me, brutalism has always been the most straightforward, down-to-earth architectural style. You can see exactly how it's made, you understand it, and you can even imagine building something like this yourself. When I was a kid and my father was building our summer cottage, I often played with wood, sand, and sometimes even cement. Making molds and pouring my own concrete was something I found incredibly fun. What I wasn't so good at was going to school and drawing those silly flowers and horses they made us sketch. But with brutalism, ornaments aren't necessary. You just place the building under the sun and let the play of light and shadow do the rest. Raw grey concrete looks completely different on a cloudy day, under the harsh midday sun, or in the soft glow of a rose-colored sunset. It's like getting 3 visually distinctive buildings or monuments for the price of one. That simplicity, that openness, That self-reliance, that's what defines Yugoslavia, and Serbia in particular. A country caught between East and West, unwilling to submit to either, boldly said in the 1950s, "No East, we don't need you or your imperial style. We'll create something great on our own." And they did. 40 years later, they turned to the West and said, "No, we don't need you either," and then built a Soviet-style metro station just to prove the point. That boldness, to rely only on yourself, to do what you believe needs to be done, and to present the result to the world knowing the reaction would be widely mixed, that is what makes brutalism so compelling. It's no coincidence that the 20th anniversary remake of one of the iconic 90s clips where a kid with a remote control makes people dance in the Helsinki metro was filmed in Vukov Spomenik station. But jokes aside, Belgrade residents truly deserve a decent metro system. In 1982, they approved a 2% tax on all employees' wages and business income destined for constructing the metro. That same year, however, the project was cancelled, but the tax remained in place for several more years. What did the government do with all that money? That's an interesting question, and we'll talk about it in the next video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet, and see you again soon.